Hello, friends. Welcome to our fireside chat on Android XR. We're all super excited that earlier this month, Samsung announced the availability of Galaxy XR in the UK. And you may have also heard that Xtro plans on bringing Aura to Europe later this year. And just yesterday at Samsung Unpacked, we shared that audio glasses are also coming later this year, this time in partnership with Warby Parker and Gentle Monster. So, with the expanding availability of Android XR devices, we thought it would be a great time to touch base with the community and answer some questions. My name is Vinny, and I'm an Android developer relations engineer, and I have the privilege to work on Android XR. We'll be taking some live questions from the audience towards the end of our session, so please ask them in chat and we'll try to answer as many as possible. We also love to see everybody's emojis reactions on chat, so even if you don't have a question, get the reactions ready. Now, to help answer the questions, we recruited an amazing panel of some of my favorite people. First, we're joined today by my colleague Stevan on the Android XR product team. And we also have several developers and community members joining us to share their expertise with us. Julien, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Julien Salvi. I'm an engineering lead based in Paris, and I'm also like Android GDE.
All right, wonderful. Ahmed, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, very excited to be a part of this. I'm Ahmed Tikiwa. I'm a senior software engineer at the Walt Disney Company. I'm also the CEO and founder of Tikiwa Digital, and a Google developer expert as well, just like Julien. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, over to Karim.
Everyone. My name is Karim Morsy. I'm CEO and co-founder at Algoriddim. Really excited to be on this panel today, and we make DJ the world's number one DJ app.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karim. Colin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Colin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Sphere. We built a turnkey solution for industrial enterprise, most notably aerospace, defense, and complex manufacturing. It's great to be here. I worked together with Google and Google Creative Lab on the original AR core launch in 2017. So almost a decade later, here we are full circle again for Android XR. Thanks so much.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, Victor. Oh, you might be muted, Victor.
Oh, I was muted, so let's do it again. Hello, and thanks for inviting me to this fireside chat. I'm Victor, co-founder and CTO of YBVR. We've been around for 10 years doing streaming of live events in virtual reality, XR, spatial, you call it. We support it. Our specialty has been sports and entering recently into culture. I'm very excited to be here.
All right, thank you all so much for participating. This is amazing. I'd love to start with a really fun question, and I'd love to hear from everybody. But I'll maybe start off with Ahmed. So, if you could pick one sci-fi movie, show, or book that you feel depicts where you want XR to go, which one is it and why?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. I would say Ready Player One. It's actually interesting because I remember when I watched it in 2018. I remember being so enthralled by the technology. I mean, you just put on your headset and then you're immersed in a whole new different world. And it's crazy to think that today we can actually imagine that, as in it's not something that's far fetched. Yeah, so I see a collaborative space where we can build, create, as well as maybe learn together, create some shared experiences online. Yeah, be able to just be in this world that is not bound by a physical location, but where you can just enter in and collaborate in an XR environment. Yeah, so Ready Player One is the movie for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I also love the book as well. Stevan, why don't you go ahead? Let us know what your thoughts are here.
I think for me, probably the experience that I kind of would love to make possible is in Iron Man, like Tony Stark, when he is interfacing with Jarvis and he's like on his workspace and he has, diagrams and he changes things. He's able to like have really natural input and just, it's like connects, I think, AI with both like the real world as well as like, spatial content on top of it. To me, I think is really, really cool. And, it like all of the things he creates on that table with Jarvis then becomes like reality, which I think is really cool, like physical changes. So I don't know. I think that probably would be like the future I'm most excited for.
Very cool. Victor, are you more Ready Player One, Iron Man, or something else altogether?
I'm gonna go with something that is maybe not exactly what XR as a technology should go, but like what the feeling of XR should
Love
be.
it.
For me, my choice is Narnia.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a magical world, and you step in, and you are completely elsewhere. Now, I would like it to be so that I don't have to go to a special place to go back to my real life. So that's why it's good that it's a headset. But that's the kind of feeling that I think I want XR to really get me to.
Oh, that's a interesting take for sure. Colin, why don't you go ahead and let us know what fictional story do you think really depicts XR well?
Yeah, I think I'm in a bit of a similar vein, like Victor, maybe something that's not classically associated with XR, which has been very visual. But I've always been a big fan of the movie Her. And I think now, especially with XR and AI kind of blurring the lines together, this idea of kind of ambient computing, something that blends in with our life, rather than maybe what we see now, at least in my role, which is something very purpose driven. You put on a headset for a very particular task, but something that kind of moves and travels and thinks along with you.
Yeah, especially with all the AI that we see nowadays. Karim?
For me, it's probably the movie Interstellar, because I remember quite vividly watching it, and I felt really immersed, even though it was just in a normal cinema. And I think that's really the beauty of XR, that you can double down on that with music and visuals and all these sensations. Just really feel like you can go to any place in the vast universe without needing wormholes and things like that.
All right. And then Julien, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, on my side, I'm more like into Ready Player One, as Ahmed said at the beginning. But I hope we won't fall into the movie existence. That was like a thing, but like I hope like XR won't fall into. It was kind of like the creepy side of like XR VR and stuff.
Well, thanks everybody for your thoughts. I'd love to hear everybody. Ready Player One and certainly Iron Man are things that definitely come to mind. Okay, so let's get to some questions. So Stevan, with the Samsung Galaxy XR having recently launched in the UK, I think it was July 8th, what does this hardware milestone mean for everyday Android ecosystem? How should developers focus on maximizing developer reach and scaling applications?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're looking at this as like a long-term investment for Google and for Android in general. So the expansion of Galaxy XR into like a new territory for us is just hopefully another signal for developers as well as consumers that like, hey, these are products that we want everyday users to use. A few years ago, we like announced our developer kit. We worked with a number of developers with that developer kit, and now it's getting into more and more consumer hands. And we hope that it will continue to do so. You mentioned XReal, which is another device that we hope to be rolling out in a few months from now. And we are continuing to work with a number of OEMs to continue that expansion for consumers. And so for us, it's all about just maximizing your application discoverability and reach across more markets. And in this case, the UK market, which is great. And hopefully scaling your user acquisition inside kind of the consumer spatial ecosystem. So yeah, more users, more territories, more scale. That's what we're hoping to do. And we're hoping to continue to do that later this year.
That's awesome, Stevan. Thank you so much. Anybody have any additional thoughts here? All right. So Victor, YBVR is currently working on bringing the San Francisco Ballet's Nutcracker to an immersive audience. What unique design or technical insights did you discover when building this premium experience natively on Android XR?
Hmm. I really am liking the fact that the form factor is finally challenging our production capabilities. Since we started YBVR 10 years ago, let's say that our ability to bring high resolution, high quality experiences far exceeded what the like actual devices could do. Um, and now we're seeing, I think this is the case of both Aura and Galaxy XR, a device that is really showing all the detail that we were hoping like we could achieve. And in some cases, it's like challenging for us to finally see how those little mistakes that maybe in the past were like we could like rugged and like hide them. Now we cannot, and that's great because that means that we're reaching a level of fidelity that makes the whole promise of making you feel like you're there be much closer to reality. So that is a great creative side. Uh, the the counter side is that it's kind of easy to overdo it. So don't like our takeaway is like don't overdo it, especially on the bitrate side. You can get like some really heavy stuff, and this is like we as developers were supposed to be delivering this over streaming, so we need to keep this balance, right? We're excited about the fidelity. We need to like restrain our excitement on the bitrate side. But the good news is that there's new generations of not just software on Android XR, but also on the supporting hardware side. So we are able to relax, like to balance all this with like greater support for compression and codecs. So we're excited about the support of AV1 and multi-view HEVC, for example. So that helps, let's say, so that we don't have to rein in too much. We still need to do it, of course, but like some more freedom to like bring the creative vision to everyone.
Got it. So sort of the new class of hardware is opening up a lot of doors that were previously closed from ability to create content. That's very cool. That's very cool. Anyone have any thoughts here? As far as like creating content and what some of these new capabilities or on the devices are bringing. I don't know if Colin, you have any thoughts here from an enterprise perspective.
Yeah, I think for a certain class of our customers that are very visual driven, we work with a lot of engineering teams that want to do less, immersive media and entertainment, but 3D visualization. And being able to work as close as you can to the source 3D files that the engineers work with every day, as opposed to some kind of proxy representation or simplified version, just brings them that much closer to the work that they have to do and on a device that can support it.
That's awesome. Thank you both. All right. Okay, so one of the great things about Android XR is that you can easily extend existing mobile and tablet apps to a large screen in a resizable virtual screen. Julien, for developers who have successfully created 2D apps on the Google Play Store, what are some quick wins to ensure that the app feels great inside Android XR environment from day one?
Well, one first good thing, like if your application is already running like on your devices, like tablets, phones, it's already running also in Android XR. So like you will have like your 2D experience, but to get like the best of it, like you definitely need to look at the best practices, the Compose XR components, like to like push your screens into the dedicated spatial panel, take advantage of the orbiter for the navigations. So you will have like a lot of components to take advantage of, like to take the best of the space you have in front of you. Also, like you'll be able like to add like some 3D models, 3D visualization to like extend what actually you already developed for your 2D application. So yeah, like have a look at the best practices, especially like we are switching paradigm from like 2D to 3D. If your application is already adaptive, that's a huge win from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Being adaptive is a great head start. Stevan, do you have any thoughts here as far as like maybe 3D content or AR core type of geospatial capabilities? Anything to add there?
No, I think something that we always talk to our developers about and that we learn about, we talk internally as well, is like, you know, you want to focus on the user problem you're trying to solve and like the experience you're trying to create, and basically you leveraging the technologies in order to do that. For us, we look at like 3D as a great way for education use cases or media use cases, for instance, where users, consumers need to understand something, they need to feel it a little bit more, they need to understand the depth of it. There's a lot of enterprise use cases as well that leverage a lot of 3D models, and it's critical to do so. And with AR core and geospatial, that is really a more, I would say, like outdoor exploratory use case. And that's why products like XReal, as well as our intelligent eyewear products, I think are really interesting, and will enable those type of experiences. And I think it'll be really, really interesting to kind of see what developers and you all create. But I imagine a lot of use cases like gaming and education and tourism and local discovery, kind of expanding quite a bit with those technologies as we bring in the real world more and more. So yeah, that's how we look at it.
Awesome. Thank you, Stevan. Victor, I wasn't sure if you had you're trying to chime in here. Do you have any thoughts here as well?
I think that Google has taken a good like effort in making it sure that like whatever you have on your existing platforms works on Android XR. So I think our first point was like, well, the app already by default works in some capacity in Android XR. Second is like when you want to grow it, like, it's the same Jetpack if you're doing natively. And then there's also game engine support, which is like something big for everyone who has worked in XR for a bit. So always seeing that like the commitment to OpenXR, and that helps, let's say, minimize the gap that is needed. So it's not as scary. I guess that's the point.
I do agree with you. All right. So Algoriddim's DJ app supports DJ controller and mixer hardware. Where there's a lot of emphasis on like physical interaction with the turntables. Karim, when transitioning DJ into Android XR spatial environment, what were some of the biggest UX paradigms that you had to throw out the window and work through, and anything that you needed to invent to deliver your experience?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The way we kind of addressed this when we started at the drawing board wasn't even so much like what do we throw out the window, but more what should have been three-dimensional in the first place. Like, for example, we have 2D virtual turntables, and of course that's a no-brainer, like to turn that into a virtual 3D object that's just natural to interact with. Like everyone knows how to operate a record player. And then we also thought about things, because you could easily fall into the trap of trying to three-dimensionalize every interaction and everything you had in the app. But there are certainly things that we feel work great in 2D. For example, browsing large music libraries, like thousands of tracks. We just feel like a table view is the best way to do that, more so in XR, where it just augments the physical objects. And then, of course, there were the things where we felt like, okay, what are the interactions that have never been possible on any like physical hardware or 2D interfaces? And then we realized, well, in a way, musicians and conductors, they've been like manipulating music using just their hands for centuries. It's the most natural way to interact with music on a high level. And that's really where we saw the big opportunity of where XR is really taking this experience and capability to a whole new level, where now instead of just interacting with a physical turntable or a virtual one that has like its constraints, you can just freely move your hands and get much closer from feeling something inside of you and then expressing it just using your hands and not having to worry about touching, a physical thing at the right position. It's the most natural way. You're almost like dancing, but you're affecting the music with your gestures. So to us, it was really about combining those three levels. Like what already works great in 2D, what should have been 3D in the first place, and what is something that we can reimagine altogether.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So sort of saying like you need to take a step back and think about the problem space and sort of figure out what the right approach of attack is.
Correct. And really thinking about like how do we not just port something that already works great on mobile to 3D world, but how do we double down on that? And we kind of had that. We actually originally started on desktop software, and then the mobile revolution came. So we kind of went through that process already. Like how do we leverage touch? And now you're not constrained to a mouse pointer. You have multi-touch, and you have a lot of things you couldn't do before on a traditional computer. And then of course we have the physical hardware, which has been around for decades. And then we felt like XR is in a way the pinnacle of that, and that we could combine everything and build on that and take it a step further in terms of a platform.
All right, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of taking advantage of the strengths of the platform. All right, so this year's Google I/O put a massive spotlight on how Gemini is deeply woven into Android XR. Stevan, on Galaxy XR, Gemini can contextually understand what a user is looking at or doing. How do you think this will impact experiences for consumers in the future? And what sort of use cases do you think this will be valuable to developers and to users?
Yeah, so I think I kind of gave the Jarvis example before of AI interfacing with the real world. I think with Galaxy XR, we've started to do that with circle to search which allows you to kind of circle something, and then it kind of takes that context, is able to search it, provide you insights for it, as well as Gemini Live and being able to interface with it across physical, but like real world and digital surfaces. And so we kind of see this as expanding across different types of devices. So with Galaxy XR, but also with other devices that are coming up, and just providing, I would say, more spatial intelligence with AI, and in many ways hoping to provide that with for developers. So both spatial as well as ambient intelligence is something that we think of a lot about. For instance, Gemini is aware of what's happening in the world around you, being able to provide developers with those signals so that they can, have that context and understand what's happening with the user, and then adjust their experience accordingly, whether it be, the user is on the go and is indoors and then goes outdoors, and being able to understand that and then change the experience based on that, or whether they're driving or walking or running or exercising, and being able to kind of change or adapt the experience based on what's happening with the user around them. So we see AI and Gemini being leveraged more and more by the platform, our own 1P apps, as well as developers through APIs that we hope to provide. And just make it more natural for the user to interface with applications, experiences, as well as AI itself. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Stevan. I know that from working with developers with on intelligent eyewear, I know how important it is to have a great conversational experience. All right, so this next one, I'd love to hear from both Julien and Ahmed. So how has the previous adaptive UI work that you've done to support other form factors like window size classes is helping you build for spatial experiences? Let's start off with Julien.
Yeah, that's definitely like a big advantage. Like if your application is already adaptive, that's a big win to port your application in Android XR. Like for the notice, like when I first tried to port the AirCall application to XR, our application was not using any adaptive Windows classes component. So I saw the pain, like to having like screen tweaking the navigation to make things work correctly in different spatial panels. Also, like having components like too much coupling between components could like definitely not ease the integration. So having some isolated component is also like a huge advantage to put like one navigation component into an orbiter that is like truly isolated. Like you'll have like a big win, like not coupling everything. So isolation is key as well. So yeah, I've seen all the pains not having like adaptive UI. So yeah, definitely if you want to go push your experience in XR, think first of pushing like your experience into the all the adaptive components, and it's make the entire like experience much more easier.
Perfect. Ahmed, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so I've been an advocate for adaptive layout for a very long time now. I've given quite a number of talks around that. So I have an open source app called Up Next TV Series Manager, which I heavily invested in terms of just making sure that it's adaptive from the get go. And so it's also important to also think of it from moving away from, oh, this is the device that I'm running on, but rather the available space. So whenever you think about it from a mobile point of view and you move away from, okay, this is a phone, this is a tablet, but okay, how much space do you actually have? Then you actually start thinking strategically. You start thinking from the window size, so from compact, medium, and expanded. And when you already prepare your app in that space to actually say, okay, can it handle all these three sizes? When you move to XR, it's literally just an extension, so which is nice. And also the fact that XR itself is not a whole new platform per se. So you write your code, your same Android app, you don't have to write a separate one. It's your same code, and it's being extended on a whole new space, an unlimited space, so to speak. So the work I heavily invested in Material 3 adaptive, and that is also already paid off. And so like everyone mentioned, like from the get-go, your app will just start working in a 2D environment, and then you then just start adding everything like from the 3D side. So yeah, just investing in Material 3 adaptive was really a big win for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cool. Any other thoughts or comments here? All right. Okay, cool. So, Colin, so given Sphere's focus on enterprise use cases, how do open standards like OpenXR and cross-platform strategies help engineers justify the commercial impact of building dedicated Android XR experiences, especially when you're trying to like talk to executives or trying to land a deal with partners?
Yeah, I think independent of XR, I think enterprises when they make technical decisions where they want to go, where they want to buy, there's always an emphasis on kind of de-risking a decision, and they're not making a decision for the next 6 months. They're looking in 5, 10 year kind of time horizons, and standards like OpenXR, platforms like Android XR do exactly that. And I think a big part of this is the amount of flexibility that they give. What we've seen with some of our customers, right, as XR grows and grows more internally within the organization, it's not like there's one kind of super app that does everything, right? You're building use case driven apps, a suite of tools for different cases, and this pairs perfectly with Android XR's direction as well, right? You have different device classes, different trade-offs, pros and cons, but you can kind of mix and match these to those use cases that an organization has. Um, and I think especially what's resonated a lot in the enterprise space is when you see a company like Google getting behind Android XR, there's an extremely strong signal that not only is this technology something we believe in, something that's the future, but there's a level of commitment and longevity behind it, with their kind of cosign behind the platform.
That's awesome. I am a huge fan of OpenXR, and I love the fact that developers, have an API surface that they can work against that will work across multiple form factors and platforms. And I think in particular, as like we're starting to have differentiated types of devices, like Aura, which is optical see-through, and something like Galaxy XR, which is a little bit more immersive. The fact that developers can query capabilities and have one app that can apply to multiple devices, I think is super interesting. Anyone else want to have any comments here? All right, I'm just a huge fan of OpenXR. Oh, go ahead, Victor.
Yeah, there's one thing. I think that we can all admit that XR is still a like nascent space. So in order to be able to capture the whole audience, you cannot have that many quirks to every single platform. So that's why making it possible to have literally like in the equivalent of a hackathon day an app going in Android XR. I think it's a great way to show that, hey, well, we're gonna be able to have a polished experience in a reasonable time, and that becomes critical. When you said, hey, well, how much more complexity do I want to add to my already complex ecosystem of like all these different places I need to support my experience in. Having that support and seeing that Google is taking it seriously in like following the standards and contributing to the standards, makes it a bit easier to make the decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I really love about that is the fact that open standards like OpenXR allows developers to focus on the things that they're really good at, which is making amazing content and experiences, and not have to worry about all the boilerplate to support their platforms. Um, all right. So one of the most popular use cases for immersive XR is entertainment and media specifically. Victor, could you talk a little bit more about some of the challenges you face when incorporating media playback in your experiences?
Yeah, and I think that maybe on the surface it looks like it's easy. It's just a video, right? You just put a video, you project it. The problems begin when you want to start adding elements to the experience to it, right? Let's think of some of the stuff that we've done in the past. Imagine that now you have a full immersive experience of a game. Well, the first challenge is I was mentioning at the beginning this don't overdo it, and I think that applies to the fact that a basketball match you're going to be 2 hours watching it if you stay long enough, right? So then you need to be mindful of what the long-term implication of your media experiences will take in the device. It's not so. Let's say you need to take into account that you will be running for long, and therefore that has thermal implications and battery implications, basically. So you need to be mindful of what's the performance and behavior is going to be on the long run. Be ready for it, calibrate it. Then it's if you start adding dynamic elements, we have stats, and we have 3D visualizations, and we have 2D visualizations, and if those elements are going to be running alongside, you need to have some headroom. And I already mentioned that there's great hardware codec support, but the hunger for quality is always greater than whatever any technology can deliver. So you need to keep that in check and make sure that no frame is dropped ever. So that can be challenging because you need to be very attentive to all these new extra elements that you want to add, that they don't end up hurting the experience because you are paying a little bit more of a tax elsewhere. And I think the third challenge is that it's also easy to overdo it in terms of overwhelming. So you need to be mindful that well, attention span can only go so much, and you need to like help the audience know like what is the most interesting bit of the action, and maybe dim or hide or make more transparent other stuff that is not necessary at the moment, but then surface it when it really is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. With immersive devices like Galaxy XR, it's totally immersive, so it can be easy to overwhelm the users. That's a really good point, Victor. Um, all right, Kareem. So Algoriddim works on a variety of Android form factors. How do you architect your application to support all of these form factors? Like, what? How do you think about that backend, or what are some of your strategies here?
Yeah, so we were actually one of the early adopters of Android when people started switching from desktops to mobile. So we already had in mind, like when the paradigm shift from desktop to mobile came, we realized, okay, some of the things, some of the architecture of our audio engine and the visuals, we kind of architected it in a way where it's fairly cross-platform. And the beauty of going from Android to Android XR is like 80% or 90% of our playback engine, just everything just worked out of the box. So it was quite quick to get something going. And then again, some of the paradigms where we feel like they translate nicely from Android in 2D to Android XR, like the media library. Those are components that we can very easily reuse almost for free. And then there is other experience that we tailor just for the XR specific case, like interacting with a 3D turntable or using three-dimensional effects cubes. So we kind of partition sort of the app into things that, the audio engine is the same across all platforms. And then some of the UI parts are identical, whereas others are not, and we try to clearly separate those.
Yeah, and Karim, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys have a very specialized audio engine, right? That you guys built from scratch. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, like everything is custom made because we need, like when you scratch or you do effects and things like that, we need to have full control over every audio sample to get to the quality and the experience that we're kind of pushing for. So from the get-go on Android, we had to make sure we're in full control of the audio stack, and we were blown away how seamless it was to bring that to Android XR.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ahmed, how do Android Studio tools bridge the gap between traditional 2D UI components and immersive development?
Yeah, so the one thing that is already there out of the box, and so also like I mentioned earlier, um, Android XR is just basically an extension of what you're already building, which is nice. So existing tooling that is already there within Android Studio, you can actually use it for development. So the emulator, for instance. So usually, if you don't have a physical device, there are emulators already available within Android Studio. So from the get-go, you've got the headset, which is currently in the stable version of Android Studio. Then in the Canary versions, you also have the wide and audio glasses, I believe, as well as additional emulators that you can use to test. And then being able to write your compose. So compose already has the functionality where you can do previews. So you can also do the same as well when you're testing out your anything to do with your spatial components, anything that you're writing there within the XR space. So you can test it just like any other code that you've written, and as well as a project template. So even when you're starting a new Android project, so like how you can select new project with activity, you can also do the same as well for XR. Yeah, those are some of the tools that are available to you already out of the box.
Yeah, I think it's a really great point. One of the things that we always think about on Android XR is that we really want to go to where developers are at, and that's one of the reasons why we're also not only are we bringing sort of all the tooling from Android Studio and emulators to developers, but we're also working with partners like Unity, and more recently we announced that we're working really closely with Godot and Unreal Engine as well. So yeah, I think it's great that we're able to sort of be wherever developers are. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so another exciting announcement that came from Google I/O was that audio glasses will support iOS. Julien, how does this sort of cross-platform capability impact the broader business case and strategy for developers looking to invest in Android XR?
Yeah, I guess that's a very good news actually. Like supporting XR for iOS, like it will strengthen the adoption. It's not only for Android, but like for both mobile, Android and iOS. So like XR will be in a better place, especially like I'm working for like a B2B company. iOS takes like a large space for our customer base. So having the possibility to have like the AI glasses with like an iOS device, that's clearly like a huge win in terms of adoptions.
Awesome. Any other thoughts to add here? Okay, cool. So I always tell this to developers that I definitely believe that there's an Android XR device for every user and there's an Android XR device for every use case. Now, Stevan, with Android XR now scaling across headsets like Galaxy XR, audio glasses, and then Extra Aura, as we talked about in Horizon, how do you design apps to scale gracefully across a device that can have like dual 4K displays all the way down to a device that's entirely audio driven?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this is, as I was saying earlier, like it's very critical for developers to think about the problems they're trying to solve for the users, and leveraging the technologies in order to do so. And so, depending on the experience, it might make sense for you to have a great 4K experience, but an audio only experience might not make the most sense based on the problem you're trying to solve and the use case you're trying to, perform. And so, I think we look at a lot of, I mean, all the apps here that this great group of developers build are focused on a specific user and a use case and a story that they're trying to, push through. And your application should be able to do that across these different devices if the use case and the problem makes sense, right? If, for instance, you're building a streaming and immersive video experience, an audio-only experience might need to be significantly different. It might be a different type of problem you're trying to solve. But if you're building a translation experience, you can see them working well across these different form factors. So it's all about kind of the use case you're trying to build. But the app architecture itself allows you to do that within one application, which is really nice. And that's kind of our goal, right? Our goal is to make it easy for you to scale your application up and down, depending on the use case you're trying to solve. And so, yeah, that's how we think about it. So, yeah, you can do as much or as little as you want to, depending on the use case. So.
All right, thank you, Stevan. We actually got a live question that I think is related to this. So VR Dave Trades is asking, are there plans for native UI scaling in Android XR? Adjusting screen density in developer settings often breaks 2D apps that take up too much space due to gesture optimized touch targets. Any thoughts here, Stevan?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think would love to learn more about the interest. I think one thing that we've been looking at a lot is designing of 2D like interfaces. And the reason why this is starting to become more and more important for us is on the mobile and large screen side, material and kind of Android design has been there for a while, and that's what we leverage for most developers. And then on the glasses display side, we introduced a new design language called Glimmer, which is optimized for glanceable experiences or augmented experiences is kind of how we think about it. And so we are exploring how to make these design languages work a little bit more closely, and to make it function better on XR as well. The other piece that we've done is, especially for developers that work across different engines, is we've introduced the Android XR interaction framework, or AXRF, this last IO, which basically brings in a lot of those native Android inputs into Unity. So you can have those same type of, hand tracking, hand input, like in as well as UI elements that you have natively on the Jetpack XR side. So I think we're exploring. We're trying to introduce more. However, I'm sure there's more we can do. So please let us know how we can support you, as well as other things we can introduce in order to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stevan. And VR Dave trades, if this potentially could be a bug that we need to look into, so please file it. I'm assuming we're talking about scaling for accessibility reasons. So we'd love to be able to look into that as well. Okay, so also from VR Dave trades, will we see enhanced keyboard and mouse support for desktop style productivity workflows? Who wants to take that? Okay, I'll take this one here. So because Android XR is built on Android, all the support that we have for peripherals like keyboard and mouse should just work out of the box. I don't know if any of the panelists here have been working with things like keyboard and mice, or even other peripherals, but all of that should work out of the box. Because we want to make sure that sort of, especially when you're coming from things like our new Google Books, etc., we want all of that to feel like a cohesive experience. And I'm also going to add that we also support, via Bluetooth, we also support gamepads, right? So if you have a really great experience, like 2D game experience on tablet or mobile that supports gamepads, that will also work really well on Android XR. Any other thoughts from the panel?
Yeah, I can add to that we have MIDI integration on Android, and we were quite pleasantly surprised that MIDI over Bluetooth just worked very seamlessly. So you can have a physical DJ controller, and then we just render the waveforms in 3D space. So yeah, everything just worked very seamlessly, just like on a mobile app experience.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things about Android XR, that it just supports all these peripherals. Right. All right, so here we have a question from A. Fristenberg. What support for more ambient experiences are part of the platform? If we don't expect the app to consistently be running, how apps triggered in a non-intrusive way when it makes sense? Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I can share a few thoughts. So I will say this is something that we are exploring quite a bit, especially with our display glasses, mostly because they are meant to be like an all-day wear device. And what we are exploring is how we can allow users to kind of understand or know that an experience is available that they can interface with, but in a non-intrusive way. We hope to allow developers to be able to kind of be triggered based on what's happening around them, and what's happening around with the user, and then allowing users to basically decide or have like a very low, I would say low level way or lightweight way to just start an experience that might be available. So that's one piece. And then the other piece that we're working hard on is providing developers with signals of what's happening around the user, based on, context and a number of other things. But those are still early explorations. We hope to share more about that in the Android Developer Summit later in October. So yeah, please join us or follow along.
All right, we have another question from A. Frinzenberg. How is the handoff between the Gemini that is native interface to the device and our app is handled? Any thoughts here?
I don't know, Vinny, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I can add some here. So obviously we've announced a broader strategy for integrating with Gemini through app functions. That's something that our AI team has been talking about. And we expect that we're working with the AI team to make sure that those are enabled. So you'll be able to use app functions to load in. We also have some more like lighter weight approaches. So by default, any app that you enable on specifically like on display glasses or audio glasses, they will automatically be loaded into Gemini by name. So the user will always be able to launch into the projected activity that way. Okay. Let us know if that answers your question in chat. If not, we can follow up. Okay, we have another one here from E. Spurkin. Question on bringing 3D experiences that don't need to capture the full space. So I'm assuming here we're talking. Okay, so I'll try to answer this one here. I think Amy also might have added some comments in chat. But one of the cool things is that if you're coming from typical Android native development, we have GLTF capabilities. For those of you who are not familiar with 3D development, a GLTF file is a 3D model. It's an open standard. Again, we lean very heavily on open standards. And you can create 3D models or using tools like Blender. There's also a lot of other commercial tools available in the market. And there's also marketplaces that sell 3D content. But yeah, so essentially what happens is that if you want to bring in some 3D assets that you don't want to completely envelop the user in a 3D environment, you can pull in. So a classic example for use case in XR is like, oh, okay, I want to visualize some furniture and then I want to change the color. And you can do that all very easily using native Android with GLTFs. And of course, all of the engines support this as well, right? So with Unity, Unreal, and Godot, you can totally choose not to envelop the user in a complete 3D environment. You can sort of lean on either the video pass-through capabilities of a device like Galaxy XR or the optical see-through capabilities of something like Aura. Anybody else have any comments to add here? I think all of you have done some amount of 3D content. Maybe Colin, I know that you do a lot of mixed reality stuff as well.
Yeah, on the sports entertainment, another use case that is surfaced a lot is tabletop experiences. So those are 3D objects that are not in your entire space; they are literally sitting on your table. So that's the other thing that it's doable with that. And on that, I think that both the Unity approach and the native are doable. One good thing is that, well, Unity is a full-blown engine, so you can just let's say they take advantage of some of the nuanced 3D details implementations that they have, and then bring it together with a native experience using something like Unity as a library.
Oh, got it. Awesome. Okay, we're running out of time, and we're getting really close to wrapping up. But before we do that, I'd love to hear from our panel. What's like the one key takeaway from our chat today? And I'd love to start with Victor. Could you just share with us what's your one big takeaway from today?
I think the most important point for me is that it's in the end it's an ecosystem play, and like Android XR doesn't exist on its own, right? It sits on top of things, and it needs to talk to many other things, and there's already an ecosystem that is compatible, and that's what helps, let's say, us as developers bring like a lot of the things that we develop for many other platforms, bring them here, and be impactful in a fairly quickly way.
Thank you. I do agree with the ecosystem play. Colin, what's your big takeaway from today?
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting convergence between XR hardware, what Android is doing, what Google's doing with Gemini and Gemini Live and these products. And I think certainly for me, but I'm gonna guess for all the panelists here, right? You know, it's really sparking our imagination for what else can we do, right? You kind of alluded, what are the extensions to our existing applications that are now possible? What are these new affordances that we can bring in, or what are these new interactions, or ambient interfaces that weren't possible before? So yeah, excited to see what else will come, and very optimistic.
Awesome, awesome. Ahmed, what's your big takeaway?
My big takeaway is actually just the fact that your existing Android app, if you've done it right, if you have made it adaptive, already you're one step closer to actually having an XR experience that's going to be good for your users. And then it's all just about what other capabilities you want to add, what makes sense in a 3D space. Yeah, and I'm excited. I've seen some apps that really making that really a great experience for the users. And yeah, so like Colin said, the imagination is just unlimited, and I'm excited to see what's coming. Yeah.
Awesome. Stevan, what's your takeaway from today's chat?
Yeah, I think folks have shared a lot of things. My biggest takeaway as a product manager is a lot of the things that I think people are asking and excited about are things that we are excited and thinking about, which is always a good signal for me. But also, you know, yeah, like our hope is to make this as seamless as possible for developers to reach as many users as possible. So I think just that's our goal, as well as create unique and special experiences for these devices. So yeah, I think it's great hearing from the developers here about them being able to do so and how that's possible. And it's great seeing that the future is hopefully going to solve even more use cases that developers want. So excited.
Awesome. Thank you, Stevan. Julien, what's your big takeaway from today?
Well, my main takeaway will be like start building, start crafting apps. So 10 years ago, I was playing with Cardboard, Daydream. The experience to build apps like from 10 years ago to now, like it has like improved so much. We now have the tooling, the right libraries, and I guess now we also have like hardware that might go mainstream. So I think that's the perfect timing to start building.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Start building. Karim, why don't you share with us your big takeaway? Oh,
Platform is evolving. It's evolving. Sorry, I'll repeat the answer. So yeah, what we're most excited about is that we feel like it's more about the platform itself is growing rather than there is a new platform and we need to find a business case for it. And I think it's quite important to not see, even though it's a seamless bridge going from Android to Android XR, not seeing it as a one-way street, but actually seeing it more as a circle. Because when you build for Android XR, like you have to reimagine a lot of things. And actually, we found in the process of doing so, there's a lot of things you can actually bring back to your 2D app. So there's this really nice synergy. And just seeing how Google is invested into the ecosystem, yeah, I really think the big takeaway is also, I think, for developers to really try and adopt the form factor because it has huge payoffs, I think, for their core mobile 2D apps as well in the long run and in the short run.
These are some great takeaways. Now, I know we didn't get a chance to go through all of your questions. I know my colleague Amy is in the chat helping answer as many as possible. We'll try to get your questions answered. But I do want to say a huge shout out to the panelists for sharing their expertise with the community. We love having these type of discussions. Thank you all so much for joining us today and engaging with all the great questions. The Galaxy XR device is now available in the UK as well as US and Korea, and Android XR will continue to expand to new devices and new markets throughout the year. Developers from all over the world can get started building an Android XR today using our SDKs and emulator. So we have Jetpack XR SDK, Unity, Godot, and Unreal Engine. And we have a slide up now that we'll be putting up with all the information and resources for you to get started. And I really cannot wait to see what all of you build. Take care, everyone. I appreciate your time today. Have a good one.